With Budibase, we're able to develop data-driven applications. Whether or not that data exists already inside of a database, through a REST API, or in a spreadsheet, we want to allow you to build solutions for your colleagues to turn that data into action. But often we want to get data from our colleagues, and forms are the tool that we use to manage that. Forms can be very simple or very complex. When we auto-generate screens, a couple of forms are created by default. The create form was created. The edit form was created. But how do we create forms when we're not auto-generating them? Let's see. I'm going to create a new screen called form. It's going to be blank. I'm going to leave the access level to be basic because I want someone to be logged in, but not one of the elevated roles of Power or Admin. And I want to create a link to this screen in my bar up here. So I'll go to Links, Configure Links, Add Link, Form, and I'll select Form from this drop down and save. Inside of this screen, I'm going to add a form block. Now this has created a form for the appointments table. I look at my appointments table. I can see it has an appointment date. It has some related data to pets. It's got a description and it's got an appointment ID and a pet ID. In my form, I want to collect the pets, the appointment date, and a description. So this is the table I want to design a form for. I'll rename this appointment block. It's of type create. So when I click save, it's going to create a new row. I can also choose to update, which will allow me to update a row, or view, which will allow me to view some data from my table. I define the table as appointments, but I can use any other data source I've added to my Budibase instance. I can set the title, which is what will appear here. And I can set the size, so I've got medium or large. I'll leave it at large. Next, I can configure the fields. I'm going to click on Add All Fields, which will bring in every field. And I'm going to remove the pet ID. So now I just have these 3 fields. Now the other thing I can notice is that actually I don't like that this doesn't feel very human readable. We've got the database labels here, but not actually what we want our user to see. So I'm going to configure and I'll change the label to just date. I'll put a capital D for description and a capital P for pets, and I'll save. Now Budibase has inspected our schema and seen that date is a date, and so it's given us a date picker. That description was text, and it's given us a text input, and it's given this drop down where we can select the pet that's going to have this appointment. Inside of configure fields, I also have these cogs. So if I click on these cogs, I can see I can add custom validation rules. So I could say add a rule, and I can say that min value of the date, it really should be today. So let's see if I can get it today. As well as scrolling through this list of helpers, we also have autocomplete. So I can do my double curly braces and type in date. And I'm going to be able to get the same effect, but by using autocomplete. So if I preview that, if I tried to make an appointment for a couple of days ago, it says error. If I try to make an appointment for someday in the future, that error is gone. Now, what would be even better, if I go back to configure fields and click the cog, is I can give a custom error. Say, your appointment must be in the future. Now when I preview, if I try to set a date in the past, I get a much clearer error message. And so now I can fix that and it's going to work fine. We can also, if I configure fields and click the cog for description, I can add that the description is required, and I can add that it has a maximum length of, say, 80 characters. We can say, keep the description short. Let's save that. Now if I have a date in the future and have a pet of Buddy and try to save this, I get an error. And that's because it failed the required validation. And if I type in a really long description and click save, it's going to say keep the description short. So in configure fields, I think I probably want to say you must give a reason. And so for each validation, we can give a specific error message to help our users be able to use this form as easily as possible. So that's the form block, a really helpful and useful tool for 90% of the forms that we want to use. But we can also, instead of adding the form block, we could add a form. And we can use this form to create more flexible and complex forms. So let's call this our multi-part form. It's going to be a create. The schema is still going to be our appointments, and we'll leave the size as is. Now I'm going to use the field group component, and I'm going to click on update form fields. And what that will do is it will look at the form that's situated inside, it'll look at its schema, and then it will create the form fields like we have above. Okay, so it's looking pretty similar so far. We'll get rid of the pet ID like we've done before. If we want to, we can add custom validation with this configure validation. And we can add the same validation that we could within this form block. We need to add our own button to handle the submitting, the saving. So we need to add that manually. So let's do that. It's going to save. And it's going to do two things. It's going to validate our form. And then it's going to save the row. Multi-part form to our appointments table. So functionally, these two forms are now the same. But what I can do here, which I can't do in the form block, is I could split my form into steps. Now for a short form like this, it's not completely necessary, but I want to show it to you so you can see what's going on. I'm going to add a component for form step. And inside of this form step, I'll put my date. I'll add another form step. I'll put my description inside of there. And I'll add a final form step where I'll put my pets and my save button. I'll just name that save button so we can see it. So now, only one of these fields will be visible at any one time. You have multiple fields available, and the idea is that we can minimize the overwhelm for our user to have to see all the fields at once for a very complex form. We need some mechanism to be able to move between our form steps. And the easiest way to do that is to add a button to each form step. So I'll add a button here. I'll call it my next button. We'll say next, and it's define actions. It's got a form step, change form step to the next step in the multi-part form. I probably want it to be on the right-hand side, so I'll stick it inside a container. So I'll bring the container here, bring the button inside, and then align it to the right. Maybe also give it some padding to the top. Now I'm going to copy that and paste it inside of my second step, which is going to have a next button, but it's also going to have a previous button. Give a button, bring it inside our container. We'll say previous button and previous. Its action is going to be to change the form step to the previous step, put them maybe in that order, and then the container can align them that way maybe. That looks a bit better. And then finally in our third step, we'll want that save button inside of container. Inside a container, we'll bring our save button inside there. And we'll add a previous button as well. So we'll do form step, back a step in this form, we'll order them, we'll have a line to the right, horizontally, and give that container some padding, some margin on the top. So let's see that in action. I've got this normal form here, but now I've got this step-by-step form. Can add my date, hit next. Can add my description, hit next. I can choose my pet and I can save. I can go back and see those previous steps if I'd like to and navigate through that form. So you can make complex forms that get the data exactly how you want it, but not overwhelm your users at the same time. And our built-in form block can get you most of the way for almost all use cases. Have fun building forms and getting data from your users to turn into action in your business.